Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are here to talk about applying to health professional school. So I'm Kiana Shiroma. I'm the director of the Pre-Health Pre-Law Advising Center. And with me today as my techie assistant is Casey, one of our senior peer leaders for our office. So thank you to Casey for helping me with this presentation. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. I do have to prepare you ahead of time that this presentation is overflowing with information and I'm going to go fast and furious. However, just know that the recording will be sent to you as well as the slides after this presentation. So you can always go back to it later on, should anything ever come up and you have other questions or concerns, you can always go back and look at what was shared. So for today if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to use the chat or the Q&A for this presentation. And then I will try to monitor those, but then if I miss those, then Casey will let me know that I can go back to those questions later on. So just to be perfectly clear, the fields that we're going to be covering includes the ones that are on this slide. So dentistry, pharmacy, optometry, PA or physician assistant, osteopathic med, and occupational/physical therapy. And the reason why these particular fields are being covered today is because they basically use the same application system. And I'll be showing you this particular system in a little bit, but they all use the same system. So they might be different colors when you actually create an account for your own, but the overall structure will still be the same. And so like I said earlier, we're going to be talking about a lot of information today. And so these are the items that I'm going to be trying to cover within the hour. So again, just bear with me because I know it's a lot coming at you. So my first question or topic that I wanted to cover was number one, right? So preparing your application. So my main focus for you is to make sure that you're ready to apply. So what that means is that you don't just have the minimum requirements of the prerequisite courses, entrance exams, scores, experience, and your list of schools, but you also need to be competitive in these areas, right? So have a strong GPA, have a strong entrance exam score, and have lots of experiences that are rich so that they can help you be more competitive for health professional school. So that's the main focus, right? Is to make sure that you're ready to apply. And if not, there's always next year, right? Like I want you to be able to put the best application forward because as you'll see in a little bit, it takes so much time and energy and money to even submit one time. I'd rather you not have to submit another time if that's not needed. So moving on to the application itself. So just so you know, applications kind of vary a little bit, but in terms of when they open, but for the most part, for all of the fields that we're covering, this would be the timeline here, except for PA apps, as you can see in the slide, it opens a little bit earlier in late April. But basically, what that means is that for general applicants or traditional applicants, they would apply at the end of their junior year or the summer of their junior year. And then once you submit your application, then after that, or actually, I'm sorry, most fields require secondary applications within the primary app. And so you'll submit both at the same time. And then after that, the schools will review your primary, secondary applications. And if they're interested in interviewing you, then they'll send an interview invitation afterwards. And that can go all the way up until even spring. Like I still have applicants who are interviewing like now, right? Like in February. And then generally speaking, those schools will tell you what their decisions are by March or April. If you're on a wait list, that might be even later on though, just to prepare you. And then most health professional schools start at the end of summer, early fall around there. I just wanted to give you a brief overview about what that timeline looks like. And so we're starting this presentation now or giving it now in February because there's so much planning and preparation that needs to be taking place before you're able to submit your application in summer. So the earlier that we have you start, the better. So it's great that you're already attending this presentation now. So like I said earlier, we're going to be sending you the copy of these slides. And then in this particular slide, you can click on the application service for your particular field, and you can already open an application yourself. And the reason that I want you to do that is, again, to see what's ahead, right? Also, just FYI, in the bottom right-hand corner, so the other senior peer leader in our office, Lauren, she did an amazing job with redoing the slides and then also adding links. And so if we have any more kind of web pages that are linked for this particular topic of the slide, then that's linked to the bottom right-hand side, as you can see there. So just for your reference. So just to be perfectly clear, the primary application is where you would complete the primary application or the main app for schools. So this is where you have everything sent, your letters of recommendation, your transcripts, your entrance exam scores, all of that will be sent to one application system. And then that way you won't have to send individual applications to all the schools that you want to apply to. You just have one system, and then you tell the system which schools to send your application to, which is great, right? Because then you don't have to have your references send how many different letters to different schools. And then even for the transcripts, right? You just have one set of transcripts sent to the primary application, as opposed to having different sets of transcripts sent to all different schools. So it really does save you a lot more time and energy, and again, money. So this is the meat of what I'm going to be covering tonight, is the primary application itself, because as you can see, there's 10 different parts to it. Okay, so I'm going to be walking you through the application, but then also in the slides, I'll be including the information that I covered as I walk through it too, so that, like I said earlier, you can refer back to it if needed. So if you can give me just a second, I'm going to rearrange my screen real quick so I can start showing you the app itself. Okay, so let's say that you created your own application account, and you started an application, then this is exactly what it would look like. And so this is the main homepage of the application. So like I said earlier, although I'm doing CASPA, so that would be the application system for PA schools, the format for all the other fields that I mentioned earlier, so like dentistry, pharmacy, let's see, OT, PT, and so forth, all look like this as well. Again, the background might be a little bit different, the color might be a little bit different, but the format is still the same. And so as you can see, there's 4 different sections of the application. So I'm just going to go through each one. So the first one would be personal info. And so this would include biographic and identifying information. And so what's great is that, to be honest, the application itself is very easy to use. The easiest way that I've found advisees to understand what it's like is basically like they're really long Google forms that you'll need to complete, as you can see here, right? So this is the agreement, right? So you could just scroll down to the bottom, click I agree. This bottom part here is for an advisor release. And so if you want me to be able to view your application, because I would be your pre-health advisor, then you can click yes. And then that way, if you have any questions or concerns, then I can go in and actually see your application and be better able to help you. So there's that. Oh, I forgot one more there. And then you can save and continue. And then it will have you go on to the next section, which will be biographic information, right? And then so you just keep going, right, through all of the different sections of this personal information part. And then you would complete it. So again, very easy to use, right? Is again, like very long Google forms that you would complete. So this part isn't very challenging, but there are other sections that might take more time and energy. So there's that. And then so I'm looking at my slides to make sure that I'm not missing anything before going forward. So I'm glad I did, because I forgot to mention a couple of things. So first is that with identifying information, also make sure, or biographic and contact information, make sure that you include all of your past names that you might have had. So for example, before I got married, I was Kiana Keto. And so I would put that information in the application, and then now I'm Kiana Shiroma. And the reason being is that when you have documents sent to the system, it might be under your past name. So when I was an undergraduate, I hadn't got married yet. So my transcripts would or might still be under my maiden name, Kiana Keto. So we want to make sure that all of your past names are listed so that they'll be easily linked to documents if need be. Okay, and then the next part that I did want to share too would be for the contact information in regard to the email. Please make sure that you do two things. So first is that you list a professional email, and then second, and that is one that you actually check. And the reason being is that first, schools do see your email address, so you want to make sure it's professional. And then second is that when any school has any questions or maybe additional documentation that you need to complete, they're going to send it to this email address. You want to make sure that you check it regularly. So some applicants, they make an email account only for the health professional school applications, but then they forget to check it. And then I have applicants every year who missed application deadlines because they forgot to check that email address. So again, right, just make sure that you check whatever address you list. Okay, let's see. And then the next part of the application, so if you go back to my app, would be academic history. And so in this section is where you would input the schools that you've attended, whether that's high school and college, and then also type in your courses as well as enter your standardized test scores. And so again, the apps themselves are very easy to use, right? Just again, quick Google Forms for you to complete. And so what I did want to go through with you a little bit though, was that for every college or university that you've attended, you need to request a transcript to be sent to this application service. And so just to be really clear, even if, let's say you attended a community college and you had those courses transferred to UH Manoa, even if they transferred and they're within the same university system, it doesn't matter. You still need to list every single college you've ever attended and then request transcripts to be sent directly from that college to this application service. So if it were me applying, so I attended a lot of different community colleges because I love to take online classes. And so I attended like, I think 8 out of the 10 different institutions within the UH system. So if I applied to PA school, then I'd have to list every single community college I've ever attended, as well as UH Manoa, like how it's listed here. And then again, request transcripts to be sent from every college and university to this central application system, okay? And so once you do that, you also need to, like I said earlier, request transcripts to be sent. And so I'm going to walk you through the process because it can be a little bit confusing. And again, I have screenshots of how to do that in the slides too. But since we're on the system itself, let me just walk you through it. So first is like, let's say you enter your community college and university, and then you click on order transcript. And fortunately, the whole UH system uses National Student Clearinghouse. So you're going to choose that. And then click on Visit National Student Clearinghouse now. And as you can see, it'll take you to another page. And then, so you just follow the steps, right? So enter the school you want to request your transcripts from. So let's say for me, it would be University of Hawaii at Manoa. So you click on that. And then you scroll down, you read the information, and then you click on order transcripts. And you start typing in the information there, right? Which will take a little bit of time. So you type all that in. And then once you finish this part here, then it's going to take you to the second slide. And then that's where, sorry, it's going to take a little bit of time for me to type in all this information. So what I'm going to do is change how you view the slides again, because I took screenshots of what I want you to see, or what you'll see once the application system progresses. So let me show you that again. Okay, so let's see, where were we? So we were here, and then I apologize, I forgot to mention that once you click on National Student Clearinghouse, then this box will come up with the different steps. And then you're going to copy your transcript ID number. So you just literally click on that link that says copy, and then actually go through and type in the information. So like I said earlier, step one is just your personal information. And then the second step would be to select transcript and delivery details. And so first you would click or select this education, organization, application service, scholarship, and professional licensing. And then you'll find your specific app system. So for PA, it would be CASPA. And there, that's when you would paste your CAS transcript ID number, which was that number that you had copied earlier on here, right? So you would paste that in here, in here. So that way, when the application service gets your transcripts, they'll connect it to the correct application or your correct application. And then after that, please make sure that you click electronic, because with that way, it will be sent electronically. If you ask for it to be sent by mail, the process will take a lot longer, and then it will also be open to more human error, right? Because it could get lost in the mail, it can get filed incorrectly, and so on and so forth. And so really, I do strongly recommend electronic. Okay, I'm going to pause here because I see a question in the Q&A. So great question. It was, even if I took just one class under a different college, but you're still enrolled at UH Manoa, would I include that other college in your transcript as a transcript? Yes. So like I said earlier, even if you just take one class from another community college, it doesn't matter. You still need to list that college in the colleges attended and then request a transcript directly from that college. Even if it was just one class you've ever taken, even if you had it transferred to UH Manoa, it doesn't matter. It still needs to be sent to this application service. So great question. Okay, and then bear with me again as I switch back to that same section there on the app. Okay, so like I said earlier, so sorry, this is what I was talking about here, right? This 3 steps, and then you click on copy. And then when you order your transcript, then that's when they'll ask you to paste your transcript ID number. Okay, so do that later. And then the next part would be typing in your classes. And so for some fields, there's a professional transcript entry option that you can choose if you want. And so this is basically what it sounds like, right? So you would have a professional type in your transcripts for you if you want. It is quite expensive in my opinion. So $75 for 3 transcripts, $100 for 4 to 6, and so on and so forth. To be honest, most of my applicants do not choose to choose this option, just because, like I said before, like the app is pretty easy to use. You can do it yourself. It just might take more time. And so let's say you don't want to use this service and you want to handle it yourself, as they say here. Then you just click on continue. And then after you've typed in all of your colleges and universities, they'll be listed here. And then let's say I want to include the courses that I've taken at UH Manoa. So I click on continue. And then you just click on add course, choose a semester that you've taken the class in, type in the course information. And then once all of that is done, then the blue save button will come up and then you save the class. And then you do that for every single class you've ever taken at whatever institution you've ever attended. And then you will also type in courses that you are taking at the moment. So like, for example, this semester, or also in future semesters. And this is really important, especially if you're still taking or going to take prerequisite classes. You need to put them in your transcript entry section of your app so that schools will know that you'll be taking those courses later on. And then last but not least for this section would be the standardized tests. And so you can just type in your scores here. So usually for CASPA, schools only require, or some don't even require entrance exams, but for PA schools, it's either the MCAT or the GREs. That's why they have those in there. And then if you're an international student applicant, then you would also type in your TOEFL scores there as well. Okay, let me look at my slides, make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, and so two other things I wanted to mention was that for your coursework, when you type in the classes, I do want to clarify one thing in that you'll have your title, your course code and your title, right? So for example, it would be like for biology 171, it would be BIOL 171, and then you type in the course title there. But then the subject of the course is really up to you. So it's not determined usually, sometimes it's not determined by the department that the course is under. So for example, there's biology 402, right, which is biochemistry. So for the subject, you would not type in biology, you would choose biochemistry instead, as you can see there. Okay, so the subject is only based on what the course covers, not like what department teaches that course. And this is important because this helps schools determine whether or not you've fulfilled prerequisite classes, right? So that's why if you look at the programs later on and then you see the list of prerequisites and you know you've taken a course to fulfill a certain prereq, but your course is not showing up as fulfilling it, it might be because you didn't choose the correct subject for that class. That's where you can go back to this part of the application and update the subject accordingly. So I'll show you more what I mean about that later on. And then one other thing I wanted to mention too, just to prepare you, is that this application service does not have UH Manoa's grade replacement policy. So what I mean by that is that you need to type in every single time you've ever taken or retook a class, right? So once you do that, because it'll show on your transcript, right, that you've taken and retook courses. And so you need to do the same thing. Whatever is in your transcript, you type into your application as well. And then I just want to prepare you though that the application service does not have UH Manoa's grade replacement policy. And so what that means is that they will average out all of the classes and then all of the times you've ever taken classes or retook them. And so unfortunately for those who retook courses, their GPA will probably be a little bit lower because it's going to average out all of those other times that you've taken that course previously as well. So for example, let's say you took biochemistry and the first time you took it, you got a D. And then the second time you took it, you got an A. So for UH Manoa, when they calculate your UH Manoa GPA, they'll calculate only using the latest time that you've taken a class. So in this instance, they would only use that A in biochemistry to include in your cumulative and semester GPA. Semester GPA. However, for your application, unfortunately, they will take into account all of the times that you've taken it. So both the D and the A for biochemistry will be factored into your cumulative GPA. So just be prepared. Your application service GPA, application service GPA might be a little bit lower or maybe a lot lower depending on how many classes you've retaken than what's in your UH Manoa transcripts, okay? Also, one other thing about GPA is that just FYI, schools are able to see a lot of different types of GPAs that the application system calculates. So in addition to cumulative undergraduate GPA, they also look at your science and math GPA, your prerequisite GPA, and then so on and so forth. So there's all different GPAs that they will look at. But for the most part, the ones that they really value are the ones that I mentioned, right? So cumulative GPA, science and math GPA, as well as last but not least would be the prereq GPA. Okay, and then last one for this part was that the standardized test, once you type in the scores, just make sure you type in the right ones. Okay, and then going back to the app web page or homepage, next would be the supporting information. So this is the part where if you're going to be applying this upcoming cycle, this is where I would strongly recommend that you start working on sooner rather than later. And so with evaluations, it does vary by by field in terms of how many you're able to submit. So for PA, you can have a minimum of 3, but then a maximum of 5. But then others, like dentistry, only allows up to 4. And so that can kind of vary. So you can, once you create your own account in your specific field's application service, and you can see what the maximums are. However, you'll need to do a lot more research in terms of who you're going to be asking for your letters of recommendation. And so the main focus is to make sure that you fulfill your school's requirements, because unfortunately they can vary per program. And so some schools may require a letter of recommendation from a PA and then 2 more from a science professor, whereas others might require 2 from a PA, 2 from science professors, or maybe just 2 from professors in general, right? So I do strongly recommend that you look at the schools and what they require, and then also create a Google Sheet or Excel sheet or document to keep track of that. And in our slides, we have a link for you to use a template if you want to keep track of all of that information. So that's something that I would strongly, like I said before, consider to do now. And then the second part of this section is also something that I do want you to start working on as soon as possible. And so for each experience that you want to include into your CASPA or your general, application service, you would type in all this information, and the experience types kind of vary by field, but you choose whatever is most relevant to that experience. And then you type in all of that organization information, right? Which can be a lot there. And so this is the stuff that you want to already start gathering up. And then last but not least would be for the description and key responsibilities. This is where I do want you to get started. And the reason being is that a lot of applicants think, which I totally understand, a lot of applicants think that all they need to do is list what they did, right? Key responsibilities, this basic description of what they've done. However, unfortunately, a lot of applicants have very similar experiences, right? And so you're not really going to stand out that much if you just kind of list what you did. Instead, what you need to do is treat this section like a mini essay. And it's going to be very mini. It's going to be 600 characters, including spaces. So you're not going to have a lot of space. But with this section, what you actually want to do is write a mini essay about what you gave and what you got. Okay, so what you gave, how you contributed, the impact you made, and then also what you got. So what you got out of it. How did this help you become a better future health professional school student or health professional in the future, right? So it's more about that kind of reflective essay that they're looking for. And so with this comes more energy and thought that has to go into these kinds of essays. So again, the sooner you start writing these out, the easier it will be for you once you start applying. Also, this is really helpful because I don't know about you, but I have a really bad memory. And so it's going to be really hard for you to expect yourself to remember exactly what you've done, or maybe like specific situations that you wanted to share with the review committees, when you apply, if that experience happened like a year or maybe even more, right? Like longer ago, right? So generally speaking, we would want you to have a much more richer description. Okay, I'm going to pause here because a great question came in, and I apologize for not covering that earlier on, but that would be going back to the letters of rec. So let me cover that a little bit more in depth. And so once you know who you want to ask, then what you would do is create an evaluation request. And so you type in the information here, but only after you've asked the evaluator and they have agreed to write a letter of recommendation for you. Then you would type their information in here, and then you would click on Save this evaluation request. And then what that means is that it depends on the school, but usually, I'm sorry, it depends on the field, but usually what happens is that the evaluator will receive an email request directly from the application service asking them to upload a letter. And so that's the best way to do that because, again, there's a lot less room for human error. So that was a great question that someone asked, if we have it uploaded. And then also another similar question that was asked was like whether it's the applicant or the evaluator who submits the letter of recommendation. And that's a really good question because actually you are never allowed to touch the letter, okay? The reason being is that you're demonstrating to the evaluator, to the admissions committees, that you completely trust this reference, right? And so I would strongly advise against ever getting your hands on a letter. And then also for similar reasons, I always recommend waiving your right of access to this evaluation because again, you want to demonstrate that you trust the evaluator. So you would always click, yes, I waive my right, okay? So great question there. So again, just to answer that question straightforward, the evaluator would submit their evaluation or their letter of recommendation directly to the application service, and it should always be like that. The only difference is that there are some fields that also accept letters of recommendation that are held by a third party. So usually like Interfolio or like, for example, the Manoa Career Center for UH Manoa. So a third person can hold on to, or a third party can hold on to that letter and then send it on behalf of the applicant, but the applicant never touches it. Okay, it's always the evaluator or that third party. Unfortunately, though, there are some fields, like for example, PA, that do not allow that third party option anymore. It just has to come directly from the evaluator. Good question. Okay, so let me hold on real quick and then see if there is anything that I missed. Okay. And then with that, I did want to cover too that we have a lot of information in the slides as to what to give the reference when you do request a letter. So let's go over that now, actually, before we go any further, just because I have a lot more to cover. So hold on real quick. Let me switch screens again. Okay. And so, like I said earlier, right, it depends on the school that you are, I'm sorry, the schools that you're applying to because each one is different. And then the next priority after fulfilling the school's requirements is to make sure that they can write the best letter possible for you, right? That you're choosing the references that will be able to write the strongest letters of recommendation for you. And so once they do accept your request, then on the left are things that we generally recommend that you provide for them. And again, this would be before they are getting that request directly from the application service. But generally speaking, we would recommend also giving them the information on the left-hand side, right? So the deadline, curriculum vitae, transcripts, if they don't have access to it already. If it's a professor, then the list of classes you took for them, the grades that you took or that you got from them, and then maybe some work that really highlights how well you did in that class, a draft of your personal statement if it's not done already, and then if you're having them mail, which I usually do not recommend, but if they do prefer that, then provide them with a stamped and addressed envelope. Ideally, I would strongly recommend that you ask at least a month ahead because references can be really busy. And I also strongly recommend giving them a deadline 2 weeks before the letter is actually due. And then that way you can check back on your application service and then see if they actually submitted it. And then if not, then you'd still have time to check in with them, or maybe worst case scenario, ask someone else to write that letter for you. Okay, and then first would be asking without the packet, right? And then second would be deliver the packet. So packet meaning like the things to provide in that left-hand column. Okay, so moving on, the next part, let me stop sharing. I'm sorry, actually, let me change. Sorry, I'm jumping around in the slides because they don't exactly line up with the application system, but I'm just going to go based off of how the app system is organized. So the next part after experiences would be essays. And so what that means is that this is basically your personal statement that they're asking about. And so it does vary by field, but generally speaking, the essays ask about why you are going into your chosen profession, and then what experiences have led you to apply for this particular profession. And so I do strongly recommend that you have others review. So ideally, it would be 2 professionals who are working within your chosen field. And then you can also use myself if you want. And just some tips is that are that you cannot include or you cannot save your essay as you go, or I strongly advise against it. And then when you do have it ready, that's when you would type it directly into the application service, because unfortunately you cannot copy and paste. You also cannot use any kind of special symbols. It's just a plain text box. And then last but not least, I mentioned this earlier, but again, that spaces also count as characters. And so let me show you an example of what this essay would look like. It's very basic. It's not very exciting, but I just wanted to show you anyway so you get an idea. Okay, so that would be essay here. So that's it, right? That's all you have there, is explain why you're interested in being a PA. And again, the prompts will vary depending on the field, but that's basically it, and you won't have too much space. So around 5,000 characters is around like 1 page, double space, wait, 1 page, double space, yeah, 12-point font. I got another great question. So since we can't copy and paste into the application system, does it save your progress if you log out or exit the page, or does it have to be done in one sitting? So I believe it does save. However, sometimes for whatever reason, I'm not sure why, but sometimes applicants like move to another part of the application before saving, or sometimes the system doesn't save it for whatever reason. And so that's why I strongly advise against trying to save your essay in progress in the application service. I strongly recommend just saving it in another, like outside of the system. So whether it's a Google Doc, a Word doc, whatever it is, I would strongly recommend saving it until you're completely done with it and then typing it in directly in the app system. So good question. Okay. And so, sorry, like I said earlier, I'm going to jump around because with experiences, it's kind of similar. There's also other types of listings that you can include as well, which would involve achievements, licenses and certifications, and then memberships. So let me walk you through each one specifically. And so when you add an achievement, you can see what they mean by that in this listing here. So if you have any of these, this is where you can really highlight your successes here instead of listing it in experiences where it'll be like one long list and it might get lost. You can put those achievements in here. And in these kinds of experiences or listings, like achievements, licenses and certifications and memberships, the description is very different, right? It's not like experiences where it's like a mini reflection essay. With this part, it's literally just like a brief description. So as short as you can, it's not going to be anything that's going to be too long because it'll be pretty like self-explanatory, as you can see there. For licenses and certifications, to be honest, most applicants who I assist don't have very many, if not at all. And so if you do have, it's usually like basic life support and or CPR certification. Like that's basically it, which is totally fine. And again, a brief description would be all that's needed in there. And then last but not least would be membership. So these would be professional memberships. So this does not include student organizations. So please don't list those in here. And again, I don't have any, to be honest, advisees who've ever had a professional membership to enter. These are more so usually for those who have already been working in some kind of profession already, and then are maybe changing careers then. Okay. So that covers supporting information. And then last but not least would be program materials. So this would be the section in which you would choose which programs that you want your application to be sent to. And so before you're able to do that, you need to know which schools you're applying to, right? So let me share with you my slides on that. And so with the schools, there are quite a few things for you to think about, right? And then that's that list on the right-hand side. So that includes residency, what the schools or programs focus population might be, how they might teach the program, and then also maybe areas of strength that they might have, where they're located, and then how compatible you might think you are with those schools. And so I do want you to start looking at them too, because like I said earlier, schools have different requirements, right? Not just for letters of recommendation, but also for the courses, the prerequisites, right? So you want to make sure you have those before you apply, or even if you're going to take those prereqs later on, then that's fine too, but just make sure you have them in your plan. And then also when you're looking at schools is to make sure that you know what their application deadlines are, because again, they do vary per program. And we also have a Google Sheet template for that too, if you want. Okay, so another general issue that I tend to see amongst advisees is that they don't apply to enough schools. And so I know that it is really expensive to do so. However, it would be in your best interest to try to apply to as many schools as you can. But I know that will be really, really expensive, which I'll cover in a little bit. But I did want to share with you what I mean by this. So this chart here shows the number of schools that accepted, I'm sorry, the average number of schools that accepted students have applied to. And so as you can see, it can really vary, right? Depending on the school, depending how competitive the schools are in the field and so on and so forth. But generally speaking, I would recommend that you aim for that number that's listed for your particular program. And then on the right-hand side, you can use those resources. And again, there'll be links when you get the slides. So you can click on those and then get more information about the schools and then what they require. Okay, and so I do have to show you now how to add the schools, because that might be a little tricky to do right off the bat. And so what you would do is it's kind of weird, but you wouldn't add the program within this particular part of the application. You click on the second tab here titled Add Program, and then from there you would search for the program. So a lot of UH applicants are interested in MEDEX. Oh, wait, let's see. Washington. Oh, shucks. I think I'm too late in the application cycle. Okay. Let's try a general one just as an example. Oh, shucks. What did I do? Reset. There we go. Okay. So depending on the application cycle, so like I said earlier, it's kind of later on in the app cycle already, but just as an example, you can choose schools. So once the app system opens, then that's when all of the schools will be available. But as you can see, a lot, like most of the schools within a field would go to or use the application systems here. And so let's say you wanted to add PACE as an example. All you would need to do is just click on the plus sign and then go back to your application and then program materials, and then that's where the program will be listed. So I do know that a lot of applicants like to apply to Advent Health. So let's use that as an example. And then this is a section where your secondary application questions, essays, information, and additional documents will be included. So you need to read through each school and then follow their instructions as they have it listed there. And then these would be your secondary application essays that you'd also have to complete. So you can do that as well. So fortunately, this particular program only has one, which is great. Others can have even 3, 4, I've seen up to 6. And so this part can take a while to complete too. And then feel free to, send those drafts to me to review. I can do that as well. Some schools also require additional documents to be uploaded. And so for a lot of PE schools, they do require submission of their CV or resume. So you can send that to me for review as well. And then just FYI, we have a CV resume workshop next week, same day of the week, so Wednesday, and then same time at 4. And then last but not least would be the prerequisites. And so once you start typing in your courses in the transcript entry section, then they'll see, or you'll be able to see how your courses fulfill the prerequisites for that particular school in this section here. And then here you can check if you're missing any prerequisites for that particular program. Okay. All right, so that was program material. So that covers the 4 different sections there. And then once you've added all the programs, completed the secondary information for them, and then you're finally able to submit the application, this is where you would go next, right? The 3rd tab from the top. And then once all of the application materials are submitted, then this green bar would go all the way to a green check here, and then you'll be able to submit then. But like I said earlier, this is an old app, and so the deadlines have passed for these, or actually just for Advent Health. It looks like PACE is still available. And then once you've submitted and then paid the fees, then you can check your status here, as well as your transcripts. And then also once you add your references, then you can check on the reference submissions here, as well as in this section too. You'll see whether it was submitted or not. Okay, so going back to my slides, I apologize. Like I said earlier, I know this is a lot of information to go through. We're almost done. I just wanted to go through a few more pieces of information. And so just to give you an idea, like I said earlier, it does cost quite a bit of money in order to be able to apply. So we want to make sure that you have a really strong competitive application because it costs so much. So this initial fee includes applying to one school and then the processing and verifying of your app. And then for every additional school that you apply to, you would have to pay an additional fee. And then also just to prepare you, some schools also require an additional fee on top of that to be able to process your secondary application. So it can get really expensive really fast. And so I do strongly recommend that you apply for that field's fee assistance program. And so there are a lot of different options or possible benefits that you might benefit from. So that would or might include a reduced entrance exam registration fee, prep materials for that same exam, maybe access to the school's admissions requirements resource, and then even a possible waiver of those said fees here. So it does really behoove you to just apply, right, and see if you're able to get these benefits, but they are not refundable. So you have to apply beforehand, right? If you already did these things, then you can't apply for the fee assistance program and ask for a refund. Then you have to request it beforehand, okay? And then once you're done with everything, then that's when you can, like I said earlier, right, pay online, usually with a credit card. And then you can make changes. However, your application will have to be reprocessed, recertified, resubmitted. And so it will take some time to do so. And so I strongly recommend that you try to complete your application as much as you can, as fully as possible, because it does take a long time for schools to process, certify, and submit your application. It could take anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, depending on when in the application cycle you submit. So earlier on, that's when it's usually busier. Later on, will be less busy, but then we don't want you to wait too long, right? Because a lot of schools are on a first come, first serve admissions basis. So these are allowed post-submission changes, but like I said earlier, I wouldn't recommend doing so because it will set your application back. Okay. Let's see. So moving on to tips. Let's see if I miss anything. Oh, and then yeah, last thing I didn't mention for the tips was to also make sure you check your status in the email often in case they have any questions or concerns for you, whether that be the application service or the programs themselves. And then also email the application service directly if you can't find the answers in the Q&A for whatever questions that you may have. Okay, so then that goes on to interviews, right? So like we said earlier, we would be here, right, in the summer, and then we move on to interviews there, which can start in fall. And so what that means is that, again, it depends on the school, but there are basically 4 different types. There's the traditional, like one-on-one interviews. There's also a panel where there could be multiple interviewers and maybe 1 or 2 interviewees. And the group would be the opposite. So there might be like 1 or 2 interviewers and then a group, right? So multiple interviewees. And then last but not least would be a multiple mini interview. So that would basically be like, for lack of better words, like speed dating, where an interviewer interviewers are each in a different classroom. And then you have the prompt posted on the front of the classroom, and you have, let's say, like 2 minutes to review the prompt. And then depending on the school, maybe like 3 to 12 minutes to answer the questions. And then you go around to all the different classrooms until you're done. And so however many different classrooms can vary. Some are like 3, some are 6. So it really depends on the school. And so obviously interviews are a great opportunity for you to demonstrate like how well you can speak, right? And how well you can communicate with others. And then to also allow committees to get a much more personalized view of you than just what's on paper or in your application. And so it is really important to make sure that you practice for these because it does take a lot of time and energy to be able to prepare for these interviews. And so just as many interviews as possible is what I'd recommend for you. Okay. All right. And so, like I said earlier, this is so much information to cover. So, I would strongly recommend that you start preparing as soon as possible. And so, if you go to our website, then for every field, we have its own application timeline. And in there, it will have specific links to your particular field's information. And so, I would recommend that you get started because, as you can see here, our checklists start in January and it's already February. So if you haven't started on these items already, then we do strongly recommend that you start working on these parts. Okay, almost done, guys. Next is that depending on your field, so if it's like dentistry, OT, PT, optometry, or vet med, then I just want you to know that there is a program called WICHE. So WICHE also houses WUI, so the Western Undergraduate Exchange Program that you might have heard about for undergraduate. There's also a professional student education program for health professional schools. So these particular fields here that are listed. And so it's the same idea where you would pay resident tuition for that school instead of non-resident tuition. And so I do strongly recommend that you apply for WICHE as well if you're within these fields because it's not available for every field. And I do also recommend that you apply sooner rather than later, especially for vet med, because it is competitive and when you submit your application is considered as well. So I won't go too much into that because I know we're out of time. But long story short, basically, open your application service account and start already looking at the information now. Start thinking about your personal statement. Start writing that as soon as you can so you get it reviewed. Make sure that you know who you want to ask for your references, for your evaluations, so that they will be ready to submit once you are able to open your application and then apply for WICHE if it is applicable to you. We do have, like I said earlier, a lot of other web pages that can be helpful for you. So those are in the application checklist as well as they're listed here. And then last but not least, we are kind of like still in the beginning part of our workshop series. And I mentioned this earlier, but we do have other workshops that might be applicable to you. Like I said before, next week would be the personal statement and letters of recommendation. And then also we have the MCAT and Jerry's overviews coming up, as well as a free mock that Jerry and MCAT for you if you're interested. And then to be really honest with you, as long as you sign up for the mock that Jerry's and MCAT, then you actually don't need to take it that particular day. You'll be able to have access to that mock exam 3 months from that date. So again, it's not something you have to do right there and then on that Saturday, March 11th time. You can take it later on, up to 3 months afterwards. And then last but not least, if you're thinking about taking a gap year, which is totally fine if you do, then we can talk more about what you can do within that time to, again, make your application even more competitive for that next year. All right, like I said earlier, that was a lot. I know there's a lot that we covered. So thank you for bearing with me. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns. Our contact information is there. You can also schedule an appointment with us. Thank you, Casey, for putting the link for the eval form in the chat as well. But I'll stick around in case anyone has any questions that they want to ask. You can put that in the chat or the Q&A. But if not, then thank you so much for joining me. I know it's been a really long day probably for you. So thank you so much. And then stay dry, as I know there's supposed to be like a heavy storm coming in for Hawaii. So stay dry and safe too. Thank you.